Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. My name is Brian Kelly. I'm the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications with SBAM. Before we begin, I'd like to say thank you to our sponsor, Consumers Credit Union. Not only does Consumers Credit Union offer a variety of benefits for business accounts, they're also passionate about helping improve the financial fitness of your employees. They have a program called Consumers at Work, and they provide free financial seminars, counseling, and more. So please visit consumerscu.org for details. All right, so Brian, I know you're in Marquette for some events, but would you share a little bit about what you and some of our colleagues are up to right now?
Sure thing, Sarah. So you might recall, if you're a longtime watcher, that in February, there's always a Thursday in February where I'm broadcasting from Northern Michigan University. And that's because there is a program put on by an organization called Operation Action UP in connection with some other economic development organizations like the Lake Superior Community Partnership, for example, Invest UP, a lot of things that are happening in the UP and in the Marquette area. A lot of it in this particular week and this month, it kind of centers around Marquette because of the dog sled race. So there's a really famous dog sled race that normally takes place this time of year, but get this, there's not enough snow for it. So even though they're having the festival and a lot of the activities, unfortunately the dog sled race has been canceled. But the rest of the activities go on for this week. And there is an awesome program that recognizes UP small businesses and some nonprofits and an awards program. But we've also built other programming around it, including in partnership with the Small Business Association of Michigan, with us, and for the Business Owners Success Summit that happens throughout the afternoon. And then we'll do a reception tonight. So great to be back up in the Upper Peninsula and in Marquette for some activities with some of our local partners, but then also for SBAM to host, as we cap off the evening, a reception with small business owners.
It's really kind of crazy to think that there isn't enough snow in the UP in February to run that dog sled race, but luckily they're still able to host some of the other festivities. So that's a positive thing. So this tax bill, Brian, some breaking news is coming out that I actually dropped in the chat for you in case you hadn't seen it yet. But when we last met on Monday, we were watching this tax bill really closely. So remind everyone what this tax bill will do as you catch up on the latest, greatest.
Yeah, sure thing. Actually, this particular bill, the legislature tends to do massive things during our broadcast. This is not the first time we've been following it through, and major action is happening literally as we're doing the small business briefing. But let's talk first about what the bill itself is. So this is House Bill 4001, and the bill was originally sold on it contained expansions of senior exemption, income exemption for retirement income. So before, in its first iteration, that's really all that it did. It said for those with pension income, 401ks, IRAs, it increased exemptions, and it had kind of different levels, which we had asked, and there was some response to, and some accommodation, I believe, in the bills to have private sector retirees and public sector retirees treated more equally. They still they set aside police and fire, who have unlimited exemptions, but everybody else, public and private, pension, 401k, IRAs, they treat their income the same. It's a little bit differences in terms of the age that you can get it. Pensions become active before 59 and a half. The exemptions for private sector wouldn't hit until 59 and a half, when you can withdraw without penalty. But largely, they made a lot of progress in equalizing the different types of senior income. But unfortunately, they combined it together with a whole bunch of other things. One of the other things is no problem. It's the earned income tax credit, expanding that. It's something that the Small Business Association has supported in the past, and very supportive of that part of the bill, but they added those things together. The part that we were most disappointed in was that they added a feature, rebate checks, those are fine too, but they did it in a way with the use of an accounting gimmick to de-trigger, if you will, the tax decrease that small business owners and individuals were due to receive. And so they do it by creating a fund after the fact, taking some of last year's revenue, of rewriting history, if you will, through the passage of a law saying that last year's revenue into the general fund was lower than it looked because money, instead of going to the general fund, went to this new rebate fund, and therefore the state government doesn't have to give the tax cut based on what current law says. So all of those things were packed into a single bill, as opposed to being handled one at a time. And the reason that happens oftentimes is because, well, it's hard to say to small businesses, hey, you don't get the tax cut, and to say to individuals, you don't get the tax cut that was already passed into law, that was supposed to take effect on January 1st. That's a tough vote. People don't like voting for that. So what the leadership, the governor, and the leadership in the legislature, House and Senate, decided to do is to combine that bad thing, taking away tax relief for small business and individuals, with something that feels very politically popular, senior exemptions and earned income tax credit expansion. So those things got put together in a single bill, and along with an ongoing earmark for incentives and incentive program for exclusively for big businesses. So larger multinational companies. This Ford deal that was announced was the recipient of some of the money. They put in the Income Tax Act an earmark for that, and that's really where SBAM had to come out opposed to it, is because the idea that you're taking away from small business, but then literally in the same bill, giving targeted incentives to larger businesses was particularly problematic, and ultimately something that we couldn't support.
All right, so it passed the House last week. Where does it stand right now?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that have happened, or like real time right now happening. First, if you go back to last week, the House of Representatives passed House Bill 4001. So they passed in the narrowest of margins. They need 56 votes to pass something in the House. It passed with 56 votes. And it was mostly along party lines. So it was one Democrat voted no, one Republican voted yes. But largely along party lines that it passed in the House of Representatives. But it also, of course, has to pass in the Senate. We expected that to happen on last Thursday, and it didn't. The Republicans in the Senate used a procedural maneuver and advantage they had for a short period of time to adjourn the session. So session was adjourned. They were due to come back. In the meantime, though, there was a tragedy at Michigan State that I'm sure that everybody watching this knows about. And that led to the cancellation of sessions in the legislature for a few days. And so really that work is being picked up today, that we expected to happen last Thursday. And so it's up in the Senate. It passed in the Senate. In the Senate, again, exactly along party lines. So it passed 20-17. There was one member of the Senate that was absent. There were 38 total. So it passed in the Senate. But when they put the vote up on the board for granting the bill immediate effect, that vote failed. And that has a higher threshold of 2/3 vote as opposed to just a majority. So to pass a law, you need a majority to grant the bill immediate effect. So it take effect as soon as the governor signs it. That requires a 2/3 vote. And they were not able to get that at least on their first try in the Senate.
And so what exactly is at stake with immediate effect? Why does that matter?
Well, the timing of this bill matters a lot because what they're trying to do, you have to keep in mind that this is like a tax bill. It changes the way taxation works, but there's an accounting maneuver. I'm being generous with the word maneuver. It's a gimmick, really, an accounting gimmick that is put into the tax bill in order to rewrite the finances of last year's state financials, essentially trying to reconstruct what happened with the general fund. The general fund revenue shot way up, and it blows my mind how much revenue that the state has. It's unprecedented. Never had this amount of money before, by a lot. I mean, it's just so far outside of anything that we've ever seen before. And so what they're trying to do is to make it look like the state didn't receive as much money into the general fund last year. The state's books close, but according to law, in March. This March, they have to be done with the financials for last year, and then they can't be adjusted after that. So that they call close of books. And normally that close of books would have already happened by right now. They're holding the books open in hopes of changing last year's financials to avoid having to decrease the tax rate that individuals and small businesses pay. So by holding that the books open, they can pass a law. But if that law doesn't have immediate effect that we're talking about here, if it doesn't get that 2/3 vote, 26 senators out of 38 have to vote yes on immediate effect, or the bill doesn't take effect until 90 days after the final session of the year. And so that would be next year. So what would happen is the books would close in March. The accounting maneuver will not have happened by then. Remember that this bill would not take effect until next year. Therefore, individuals and small businesses would still either receive the tax cut, or the governor would have to find a different way to stop it. And there are other, there's an attorney closely associated with the governor who's been saying lately that that the governor could just declare it unconstitutional, and then we'd have to go to court to get it enforced. So it's not exactly clear what would happen with immediate effect if the immediate effect is not granted. So that leads us to like what's happening literally right now. And what's happening literally right now is that while the Senate voted and passed the bill did not get immediate effect, which means that all the stuff in the bill will still happen, except that small businesses and individuals would still be entitled to their tax cut, because the close of books would still show last year as it actually happened. And then the Senate decided to introduce rules, a resolution to change the rules of the Senate. Now there's the rule of giving immediate effect for a bill to have 2/3 vote to get immediate effect. That's in our Constitution. However, the Constitution doesn't say how they have to count votes. And so in the House of Representatives, they've always done a voice vote. They'll say, all those in favor say aye. And people say aye or not. A lot of times nobody says anything. And then those opposed say nay, and the gavel comes down, and the speaker or speaker pro tem who's presiding over Senate say the ayes have it or the nays have it. They just do it based on voice. And so really what it is, whatever the speaker wants. So that constitutional provision, it's not like, it's never, and Republicans, Democrats have all done it the same. It's never actually been handled that is taken seriously in the House, or at least not in modern history. In the Senate, however, it has been taken very seriously. It's a vote that is put up on the board. I was president of the Senate for 8 years. And whenever an immediate effect, a bill was up for immediate effect, what I would do is what we call open up the board. It's the voting board, and it has every senator's name. And people will vote yes or no. You count 26. If it didn't have 26 votes, 2/3, it did not get immediate effect. No exceptions. The Constitution was followed to a T. And that wasn't special just when I was presiding. That's how it has been handled as long as we've had our Constitution going back to 1963, our current Constitution in Michigan. So this is a massive change that was just introduced. And what it says is, right now, the rules say to give a bill immediate effect, there must be like a real vote on it. And they changed the rules to say, let me see what the exact wording here. The Senate rules to read that an electronic board may be used to determine an immediate effect. So, but then no action was taken on the resolution before the Senate adjourned. So right now we are still waiting. We don't really know. It could have been just a show where the Senate majority says, maybe we'll change it unless you guys are willing to negotiate and give immediate effect. We'll, we could just run it without like an actual vote on immediate effect. And that's a big change. For 40 years, when it was one party controlled the legislature for 40 years, the main power that the minority party had at that time was the fact that the majority party had to go to the minority party to get immediate effect whenever they wanted it. It's a power that makes sure that the minority voice in the Senate, and in fact in the legislature, because it's the only check in the system for the majority versus minority, that was the main thing. And so now the majority has flipped, and the new majority is literally on the first substantive issue that has worked its way through the process, is that that's inconvenient. That process is inconvenient. I sure hope that they don't actually go that way, because it's one of those things, once it's compromised once, it's out the window. Now all future leadership will look back and say, well, I mean, if the people who came before me didn't have to respect the constitutional requirement for immediate effect, then maybe I don't have to either. So very disappointing that it's even on the table and being used apparently as leverage. But the fact that they adjourned without actually using this change in rule is at least somewhat comforting. But as a person who really was kind of the guardian of process myself for 8 years in the Senate, it's kind of nerve-wracking, the idea. It'd be difficult to overstate how important this change would be. Basically, it would say that unless the minority party, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, right now it happens to be Republicans are the minority party. For the last 40 years, it was Democrats in the Senate that were the minority party. Once you take this rule out, then that minority party has no voice. And I think it would be a real shame to make that sort of change. So here's hoping that this is just a temporary blip, and that this rule change will be pulled back.
So what is, speculate a little bit here. What is, the path forward? When will we maybe know, what happens next?
Well, everything's a deal, in the legislature, a lot of negotiations. And so my guess is that the new majority in the Senate that just took power is basically kind of showing like, we're willing to press the nuclear button and just blow up Senate the way that the Senate works and this part of the process, and then go back to the table and say, but we're still willing to make a deal. Maybe we won't press the nuclear button. You guys ready to deal yet or not? And so that's the, it's one of those things where it's difficult to see from the outside, to show it and then not use it, tells me that it's part of a broader negotiation. Now, what it would be also impossible to tell is the negotiation, the leverage for this particular issue, or are there other issues they're trying to leverage in order to, the show of force, we're willing to eliminate immediate effect as an actual safeguard in the system. we're willing to do that, but we won't if you do this, 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 and this. That's the part that's really difficult to tell. But here we are on Thursday. There's no session until Tuesday, so that tells me that there's several days then for the parties to maybe talk and see if they can come to some sort of an arrangement.
All right, well, we'll certainly keep on top of this issue. One of the other stories that we covered on Monday was about the new Ford battery plant that was announced to be built in Marshall, and it's getting some attention in Congress. Why is that?
Well, you might recall, we talked a little bit about this, the big economic development deal, incentives, and they've in this tax bill that we've been talking about. We've never opposed those incentives, never taken a position on them either way. But with this Ford deal in particular, Governor Youngkin in Virginia previously made kind of a big deal saying, hey, we're not going to do it because it's a joint venture with a Chinese company. We don't give foreign, which in their industry is owned by the government. We don't give tax incentives to foreign governments. There was some sort of a structural change in Michigan late in the process. Of course, I'm not on the inside, so I can't see how any of the, how any of the negotiations went. But they did appear to somehow make this one where the Chinese firm is licensing technology to the site, but won't be an owner of it won't be a joint venture per se. And I think it was really to get around this idea of a US state giving an incentive to a Chinese government-owned company. That's somewhat speculation, but but Congress is now, particularly Senator Rubio in the Senate, had put out a statement asking for the exact structure of the arrangement. Policymakers should be clear-eyed about one takeaway: if Chinese companies like CATL are able to exploit both Chinese and United States incentives for battery and EV technology through clever corporate arrangements, then there is no use in investing federal funds toward industrial development in the first place. This is, I feel like this takes it to a new level. So when Governor Youngkin said, hey, we're not doing incentives for a deal like this, that was one thing. There's some speculation. Is he thinking about running for president? Is this, but now as they go into, now as that kind of more broadly gets discussed, I think it is, it raises a policy question. No question. The politicians will use these things for political purposes, but there is an underlying policy question here, which is when incentives are given in this, what safeguards are needed to, if any, are needed to protect and understand, the influence and the benefit ultimately. Obviously, Ford feels the need to license this technology, to use this technology to advance their plans for electrification of the fleet. But a venture like this that is tied to Chinese industry, like what risks does that create in terms of when that technology might not be available in the future? So these are the sorts of things where it makes sense for everybody involved, just to be transparent and explain it. Ford is a great company, and they've got obviously long history here in Michigan, but I mean, as an American industrial company. And so it probably does make sense to just, rather than to write this off as a political thing, to just go straight at it and say, you know what, here's the deal. Here's exactly how it's going to work. Here's the agreement that we have, and here are the safeguards of the system to make sure that U.S. industry isn't taking on any undue risk. I would hope that would be the approach, as opposed to just saying, Rubio, he's political. Maybe he is, but there is still an underlying question, and transparency is a great cure for these types of questions.
All right, I'm going to end on a little membership pitch. So This week, SBAM is, we have a membership promotion going on, and we're offering 14% off a new membership or an upgraded membership. It was kind of for the love of small business in honor of Valentine's Day. So if you're watching and you're not yet a member, we'd love to have you join, and you can save 14% this week only. If you are a member and you're considering upgrading to another level and gaining, more access to events and other member benefits, that discount applies to you as well. So you can reach out to us at sbam@sbam.org if you'd like to learn more. But just wanted to let everyone know that is going on through the end of the day tomorrow. Next week, we have a webinar called Passwords, How to Keep Up with the New Normal. That's on the 23rd, and you can learn more on our website. Otherwise, we'll see you back here Monday at 3 p.m.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Look forward to seeing you next week on Monday.